ABSL Summit. Transform to thrive.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be back in Poland. The last time I was here was in 2019, speaking at your War Studies University in Warsaw. But I've not been back here to Krakow since 2011, and it's always wonderful to be back. I wanted to start with a story about my wedding anniversary. My wife and I were married on April the 30th. But every April the 30th, I don't wish her a happy anniversary. I'm a historian, so what do? Every April the 30th, I wish her Happy Hitler Suicide Day, honey. It is a wonder that she is still married to me. She does get flowers. But there's another reason why I wanted to begin my talk with a personal story about a particular wedding anniversary in 2011. My wife and I were both CIA officers, and we were serving here in Europe. And we thought, where should we go for a long weekend to celebrate our anniversary? And so we decided Krakow was the place for the long weekend, 2011. We've had a lot of wedding anniversaries since 2011. I can't remember where they were, but I can tell you that the one in Krakow was particularly memorable, besides the fact that it's just a beautiful city. I want to tell you why. I'm sorry to say I don't speak Polish, and in our rented Airbnb, I was just flipping through the TV channels, and I stumbled across CNN. Great, I'll catch up on some news. What did I learn on CNN? The night before, a bunch of Navy SEALs on a CIA mission had finally caught up with Osama bin Laden and killed him in a raid on Abbottabad, Pakistan. Why am I telling you what happened in a raid 13 years ago in Pakistan? Because as we go about our daily lives, on holiday, on your way to work, to drop your kids off at school, intelligence is all around us. It's everywhere, and it's bubbling under the surface all the time, whether we see it or not. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't, but it is shaping our world, it is shaping our business environment, it is shaping our politics, even as we speak right now. Many intelligence operations are undertaken by NATO countries, which contribute to our collective defense, but others, more ominously, are targeting the West, and we must always remain vigilant. Although most intelligence operations are intended to be covert or clandestine, there's a little bit looking around Europe that we can see. Well, while intelligence can be hard to spot, there's something that is very easy to see, and I'm reminded of it every time I come back to Poland. Specifically, I want to talk for a minute about the movement of the center of Europe farther east. This has been rebalanced by vibrant economies and vibrant democracies in the Baltics, Poland, and in other countries. As the British historian Timothy Garton Ash said last year, I quote, "The voices of Central and Eastern Europeans are being listened to more and being taken more seriously in the councils of Europe." And this phenomenon has been understood. This is not new. 20 years ago, US Secretary of Defense Don Rumsfeld used to talk about old Europe and new Europe, and he would sort of express his preferences for new Europe. But aside from senior government officials from the US, European officials, even those of old Europe, have been observing the same thing. In August of 2022, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz gave a speech in Prague in which he declared, quote, "The center of Europe is moving eastward," end quote. Jana Pulierin of the European Council on Foreign Relations observed more recently, quote, "Power has moved east, and Ukraine will cement this trend. You can see the pattern in clear moral leadership," end quote. So when you combine the eastward movement of the center of gravity, the center of power in Europe, and you combine that with the pattern of moral leadership that Jana has spoken about, you can't help but to find yourself here in Poland. And so I think a few words about Poland's position in Europe are in order. Poland's leadership role in the continent within NATO has become clear thanks to its strong support for Ukraine's struggle. As you know, an enormous amount of military aid flows through Poland and from Poland to Ukraine. On the humanitarian front, Poland has granted temporary asylum to over 1 million Ukrainian refugees. Aside from its assistance to Ukraine, Poland's commitment to broader collective security within NATO, particularly in hardening NATO's eastern flank, is revealed by the additional national security investments that Warsaw is making. Some examples. Polish defense spending is racing ahead of other NATO members, approaching 4% of gross domestic product. And from this real commitment comes real combat capability. Poland is also vastly expanding its land forces to over 300,000 soldiers, and their equipment, such as Polish tanks, is becoming state-of-the-art. These investments will result in things that we can see and things that we can touch. But I'm a former intelligence officer, and so I want to know about the things I can't see and the things I can't touch. Poland is working there as well. Poland is investing an additional $25 million in its intelligence services. Why is that happening? It's happening because Poland has long been clear-eyed about the danger posed by President Putin and his neo-imperial project. And while some countries or leaders thought that they could segment or compartmentalize a business relationship from a geopolitical or an economic relationship, I think we can now agree that this has simply become impossible. And to be honest, I think it probably was always going to be impossible. And I think some amount of feeling vindicated could be understood in Poland and in the Baltics in particular. A particular "I told you so" might be in order. But as it becomes clear that Poland has moved central in Europe, Putin sees this too. So Poland's leadership in Europe and its increasing military capability is exactly why Putin is spending more energy, resources, and attention on Poland now than ever before. In a strange, but I think predictable, parallel development, the more central Poland becomes in the European security architecture, at the same time, Poland becomes more of a central target for Putin's activity. Thus, as Poland grows strong, Putin must find ways to try to weaken it. Weakening a key NATO member is a very good start to weaken the alliance itself. And so how specifically would Putin like to weaken Poland and other committed NATO members? The threat vectors posed by Russia are as varied as you can imagine. They're often characterized as a hybrid threat or a gray zone threat. But what does that really mean? I want to give you some examples, including Russian malign activity across Europe, such as extensive cyber attacks. Cyber seems to be number one nowadays. An enormous flow of propaganda and disinformation across multiple outlets, social media, legacy media, new media, you name it. The weaponization of migrants, the sabotage of weapons manufacturing, storage areas, and transportation links, GPS jamming, right? I flew here, maybe you flew here as well. Nobody likes GPS jamming. Boundary disputes, airspace incursions, cutting undersea cables, and more. If that sounds like a lot to keep track of, it's because it is. Let me give you a few examples of the kinds of aggressive activity I'm talking about. Just a few weeks ago, Polish authorities arrested 9 suspects, charged them with acts engaging in sabotage, arson, and attempted arson, and even a beating across Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Sweden. In neighboring Germany in April, 2 German nationals of Russian descent were arrested in the Bavarian town of Bayreuth on suspicion of spying on German military premises and preparing explosives. Sabotage also happens in the maritime domain. In January of 2022, just before the full-scale Russian reinvasion of Ukraine, a Russian fishing trawler probably cut a major fiber optic cable carrying data from Norway's Svalbard satellite station, which is one of the largest satellite stations in the world. In October of 2023, a Chinese-registered ship operated by a Russian crew almost certainly cut the Baltic Connector gas pipeline, which connects Finland and Estonia. There's many such examples. The Baltics have also seen dangerous disruptions in GPS, as I mentioned, and Finnish airlines even suspended flights to Tartu, Estonia, due to GPS interference. In March, Russia probably disrupted the satellite navigation of a British Royal Air Force plane that was actually returning to London from Poland with the British Defense Minister himself. Pretty reckless stuff. On the cybersecurity front, the Czech Republic has recently accused Russia of planning to undermine rail safety by hacking into railway signaling systems. Most of us take the train, right? This is part of a broader surge in attention to railway attacks across Europe. And last month, Poland joined Germany and the Czech Republic in stating that their political parties and electoral institutions had been hacked by APT, Advanced Persistent Threat 28, also known as Fancy Bear, which is thought to be controlled by the Russian GRU, military intelligence. Add to this propaganda and Russian front organizations as the so-called Voice of Europe, which was recently uncovered and which was intended to influence European elections. These activities stretch over the whole of Europe and beyond. Last month, the director of Britain's Signals Intelligence Agency, GCHQ, she said that she is, and I'm quoting, increasingly concerned about growing links between the Russian intelligence services and proxy groups conducting cyber attacks, as well as suspected physical surveillance and sabotage operations. There are, of course, many plots that have been foiled by security services, often thanks, I should add, to friendly intelligence services. Some are in the public domain, many are not. Probably more are not. But Europe is more awake to these threats now than ever before. This is good news, because the threats are real and they are urgent. So in the last few minutes, I'd like to talk about what we need to do. During the Cold War, US President Ronald Reagan understood the Russian threat better than most. His remedy for aggression was simple, quote, "Aggression will not stop until it meets firm resistance." If this is the case, well, how does Europe resist? By making your computer networks, your critical national infrastructure, your businesses, your factories, and even your citizens a hard and a resilient target. This is also true from a commercial perspective. Security and resilience are what investors want to see as well. They want to be reassured, understandably so, that every possibility or potentiality has been thought of and has been planned for. Taking security seriously makes sense, and it makes money. Being a hard target attracts further investment, which of course is the key driver of economic development. But what of resilience? You must develop, in my view, 3 different kinds of resilience. First, cognitive resilience in your populations to identify and resist Russian propaganda and disinformation. There's no silver bullet solution here. I wish that there were. It's going to take a generation of investment in education and media literacy and critical thinking. Second, you must develop infrastructure and cyber resilience. Much of our critical national infrastructure across the West is in private hands, but the threat is so broad that we can't just ask the government to protect it for us. The government can't possibly protect every railway, every network tower, every data center, every water treatment facility. The private sector has a very important role to play here, and that's where public-private partnerships come in. Third, you must develop manufacturing and material resilience. This is achieved by 3 things, in my view: redundancy, diverse supply chains, and friend-shoring or ally-shoring, trade with countries that will not weaponize microchips, energy supplies, critical minerals, you name it. Sometimes it makes me unpopular to emphasize redundancy because it is expensive and it is inefficient. There's no getting around it. We all used to love just-in-time supply chains because it made things efficient. Who wants to have extra parts of anything just laying around unused? That costs money. And what if you never use it? It's not that you can just sell it back to the supplier for what you paid for it. Likewise, it's more expensive to diversify your supply chains because it adds complications to purchasing, to business processes, to say nothing of logistics. Wouldn't it be easier to just get everything that you need in one massive deal from a single supplier and drive down that unit cost? Sure, it would be, but it leaves you exposed. And again, what if you have more expensive and diverse suppliers, and then you never end up needing them? It's true. These inefficiencies will hurt your bottom line, and they will hurt your bottom line, but they are the only way to manage risk, and they're the only way to protect investments in a volatile geopolitical climate. So as I conclude, let me leave you with this bit of advice from my former career in intelligence. Be ready. Ask what can go wrong. Prepare for contingencies. Expect aggressive behavior from Russia, but also other authoritarian states that don't get their way. Have a plan and know how it works. No matter if you're a CEO, a chief security officer, a government official, an emergency worker, a teacher, a first responder, or just a private citizen, know your role and prepare to play it. Thank you very much.